life forms are actually speaking languages of intuition. And so I was told by my mother, who's a very fluent speaker of Lakota, that we cannot speak Lakota without intuition. And so this is the language of nature in a sense. And so when we are understanding why we are stereotyped as nature lovers, or that we are animists as Native people, it's that's only scratching the surface, so to speak. I would say we are more astralists, because our language involves cosmology, because it has everything to do with living with Earth. And it's more or less that we are seeking how to live with the Earth. In other words, having to understand what peace with Earth is all about, rather than peace on Earth. So when I speak in English, I have to always think in domination and ownership. Of course, I said subjugation and all that, because we have no word or concept for domination. There's no such word in our language. So I've come to understand this as a thing. Science is a thing that can be manipulated and lauded over others who don't have, I guess, the basic setup for science, and thinking that and understanding that it has authority, and so does religion, and so does government. So all these three things have authority. And if you're having a relational language, it's difficult to understand what a rational language is. So a relational language is being able to speak with the relatives, the relationship that is Earth and rocks and stone and water, is having those. So, for example, we don't have a word for water, and people are going to go, "What? What do you mean you have no word for water?" So I'll use the alphabet that we use now in symbolism. So I'll use three letters out of it that we don't have. We don't need an alphabet in Lakota, because everything is sent through the oral, or the energy is sent through communication of sound. So the alphabet, excuse me, is MNI. Now, someone would say, well, that's not a word. And of course, in English, is not a word, but I'm going to make it a word, MNI. And we say mni. And they're saying, well, what does that mean? And in English, we could say water. But in Lakota, we could say mni. The E is like voicing. The ni is like living. The in mni is that which is related between you and I and all things. So now we are voicing the living relationship between you and I and all things. And so instantly I'll understand that element, that consciousness, that intelligence called mni. And because it's living, it's voicing, and it's in all things. And we understand that. So that therefore our language must be beyond the subjugation or the nounification, basically. And so we are in that motion. So we must, for lack of a better thought, describe the energy, and then describe the motion of the energy. And that is our language. And this is why it's hard to interpret in the sense that reductionism in the language, we didn't have that much. We didn't need that much of a language, because we were in relationship, and that relationship always changed. So therefore our language was always in motion.
Actually, what I'd love to do, Colin, is bring you in for just very briefly to respond to what Tiokasin has just said, because you're steeped in the Southern African indigenous tradition, and I know that language and re-languaging is hugely important to you. I just wondered whether you might just make a quick response to what Tiokasin has said there.
Oh, thank you, Rachel, and thank you very much for that, Teokhsin. I really enjoyed what you had to say. And yeah, it's something very close to my heart. I mean, I find myself in a very strange position in that, you know, my ancestry comes from northwest part of Scotland, and yet I grew up in the wilderness of southern Africa among indigenous people here, primarily beginning my life speaking their language, which very much so much of what you said really resonates profoundly with me, because the tremendous frustration I consistently feel is the incapacity within English, which essentially is my mother's so-called ancestral tongue, to really articulate relationship in its deepest sense, and to limit relationship to a very, very narrow bandwidth. But as soon as I move into speaking in Setswana, which is the language I originally learned, everything opens quite naturally out, and it's no longer a conceptual grapple to try and find relating. Relating just comes out of the way talking happens, in a sense, and there's an immediate dissolution of boundary in that. And so, you know, when we're talking about this question within this particular day that we're doing here, well, how do we reanimate ourselves? Language has to be, I think, one of our first ports of call, because we're immersed continuously and consistently in language, and the extent to which that language forms around a narrative of exclusion and incarceration within a particularly small, seemingly unrelated place. We find ourselves imprisoned from the fundamental nature of who we are. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
I mean, one of the oldest parts of our history as a Western culture is a dissociation from the body, an experience of the body as mere matter. And of course, all the thinking happens in the head, and that's what we are taught. That, you know, as kids don't understand that. They're not born into that. They have to be instructed as that. And what has happened, you know, this is millennia in the making within our culture. Plato, this is 350 BC, talked about how the head was the divinest part of us and the body is a vehicle. And we've taken that metaphor to the utter extreme in our culture. And what's happened is our thinking has been desensitized by that dissociation from the body. And, you know, it's our thinking that directs our perceptions, our relationships, our actions, and our thoughts are abstract. Our thinking has become abstract. So we feel the world as an abstraction. We feel the self in an abstract way. And that, you know, the very word abstract means to pull away from. We have pulled ourselves out of the context of our true lives. And there we sit, encapsulated in the head, observing and gathering a sort of knowledge. And even our understanding of intelligence is bizarre. You know, we define intelligence as the ability to reason in an abstract fashion, which is a definition that's very flattering to the intelligence in the head. And I mean, abstract reasoning is a part of intelligence, but it's like this narrow bandwidth on a massive spectrum. And when I look at intelligence within me, within the world around me, I think intelligence is fundamentally sensitivity. And, you know, you can have a sensitivity to a child's tears, to bird song, to the sound of water running. There are countless sensitivities, and each one of them is a form of intelligence. Now, a sensitivity has to be reactive. in order to be informed. You know, if the retina didn't react to light, we wouldn't see. So that reactivity has to be grounded. So we need the body, we need the earth to make that intelligence coherent.
And Garrett and Colin, I wondered if you wanted to add anything from that. We've got a few questions have come up at the side. I wondered if there was anything you would like to say in response.
Just kind of deep gratitude for all those perspectives, kind of the adding enrichment and the different kind of viewpoints. I'm particularly interested, I suppose, in the mechanism of the sensual interplay of the body and with all that is, and how we are permeable in some way, and we forget that. And probably as well, from what Tioxin was saying about language, being a native Welsh speaker, I can echo what we heard from Colin and Tioxin. At least in the Celtic languages, the native Celtic languages, every living thing, everything actually, we have this word thing in Welsh. We don't have the in English. We don't have the word thing in Welsh. Everything is a he or a her, a he or a she. So we are already relating as kind of beings. Everything is a being in some way, and our language is very much based in feelings and instincts. It expresses those things really well, and relationship, it's not so great at kind of modern concepts. And yeah, those, all of us who have more than one language will understand the different codes that we work in order to communicate, and struggle very often with how we do that. And one thing that has come up when we've been teaching animism, we've often come to the point, teaching it through English, of we need to we need to create new words, create new concepts to try to express some of these things that the English language doesn't carry at the moment.